everybody. How are we today? Thank you so much for spending your Thursday evening with us once again. We've got a great webinar for today. We've got George from Sussex Inshore Fisheries Coastal Authority. He is their Senior Research Officer, and he popped on the screen very briefly there. Hi, George. He'll be back. And he's just finished a PhD on the topic of sharks, skates, and rays, which is very, very exciting. And Sussex IFCA is also a project partner on our Wild Coast Sussex project, and they'll be taking up the second part of our talk. And we've got Nikki and Ella from that project as well. And they're going to talk a bit about the work that we're doing, hunting for mermaids' purses along the beach, amongst other things. But for now, George, if you'd like to kick us off, it's so lovely to have you here with us.
Very happy to be here, and thank you for the introduction. So yeah, as Sophia says, I am George Balchin, and I am the Senior Research Officer at Sussex Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority. And I'm very glad to be talking to you about elasmobranch, global declines and local management. So just a very brief overview first of all. Let me just share my screen. There we go. Can you see that, Sophia?
Yep, all good.
Brilliant. Yes, so I'll be talking about elasmobranch global declines and local management. And just a brief overview. So I'll start off by introducing Sussex Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority. We'll then briefly talk about elasmobranch declines, but I'd like to focus a little bit more on why it is that elasmobranchs are disproportionately affected by human activity. And I'll then sort of round off by talking about something that I've been working on at Sussex IFCA, which is a voluntary code of conduct. And I'm going to do that because I thought it might be useful just to sort of go through some of the research and development that goes into the kinds of management that we have for elasmobranchs. So a little bit before that, a little bit about me. So up until fairly recently, I was a PhD student. I was using citizen science data to monitor shark populations in different places. I was quite lucky to be able to visit some of these places. So this is a video of my first interaction with a large charismatic shark species. This is an oceanic whitetit. What I didn't know until after this died was that I jumped off the back of the boat, essentially on top of this shark. And I think that's why he sort of span around and gave me this very nice close swim by, which I rather enjoyed. And what I did with my PhD is I took that data and I used it to look at different temporal trends, so trends through time of different shark species. So these are some of the plots from my thesis, which show the probability of sighting a shark on a scuba dive for each month of the year. So essentially what we're looking at here is the seasonality of shark presence. You can't see the species to which each of these plots pertains, but this is because this is unpublished data, and so I'm keeping that part to myself. But Sussex IFCA, just to give a brief description, look to have inshore fisheries and conservation authorities will lead, champion and manage a sustainable marine environment and inshore fisheries by successfully securing the right balance between social, environmental and economic benefits to ensure healthy seas, sustainable fisheries and viable industry. So inshore, we look to manage fisheries in a sustainable way for the benefit of everyone. There are sort of several different arms that we have to our work, the first of which is developing bylaws. So the map here shows the Sussex district. So this goes from shore 6 nautical miles out to sea and from Chichester Harbour to just past Rye Bay. So that's the area that we operate in. And the purple outlines show the marine conservation zones, or MCZs, in the district. And so one of the things that we do is we look at the area that these MCZs cover. We think about the conservation priorities, so the fish and habitats that we might want to protect in those areas, do the research into how we might best achieve that, and then submit those proposals for DEFRA for approval. Of course, very important to monitor the effect of the management that you introduce. And so I have two examples here of us doing that. The one on the left-hand side is a shellfish permit bylaw catch return. And so we have a bylaw in Sussex which states that if you want to work pots in our district, you have to have a permit. And one of the prescriptions of that permit is that you must submit catch returns. And so this allows us to know how many pots are being worked in the district, and how many lobsters, crabs, etc. are being taken out using those pots. And that, of course, allows us to monitor populations and things like catch per unit effort and other useful metrics. Another example is our work as a partner in the Sussex Kelp Restoration Recovery Project, I should say, which is a group of different organisations. There's lots, there's not just Sussex IFCA, Sussex Wildlife Trust, the University of Sussex, University of Plymouth, University of Brighton, Blue Marine Foundation. Forgive me if I've missed anyone out. And this group is is sort of tasked with monitoring the effects of the trawling, the nearshore trawling bylaw, which is management of trawling in nearshore habitats that we introduced in Sussex in 2021. And this has various different we have various different methods of monitoring for this particular bylaw. So baited remote underwater video, socioeconomic surveys, sediment analysis, shellfish potting studies, and eDNA, to name but a few. And so, yeah, this essentially allows us to measure the effects of that management, which is obviously quite important. The sort of final arm of the work that Sussex IFCA do is compliance. So on the left-hand side, you can see a photo here of Vanessa, one of our other research officers. The two chaps in the middle are Charlie and Matt, who head up marine operations. And on the end is James. And these guys, along with other colleagues, cruise around on Watchful, which is our primary research and compliance vessel that you can see on the right-hand side. And they essentially monitor the district and make sure everyone's doing what they should be doing, and no one's misbehaving, which again, of course, is very important. It's not just important to have management in place, it's also very important to make sure that people are adhering to that management. So moving on, just another shark video. This is black tips in South Africa. No reason to have this in there other than I like to squeeze in as many shark videos as I can. And I feel like they're good at getting people's attention. So moving on. As you are probably aware, and unfortunately, elasmobranchs are declining at the global scale. So this is very well demonstrated by a study that was published last year by Pakaru et al., published in Nature. And on the left-hand side, we have relative abundance of several different shark species, shark and ray species from several different places. And essentially what they've done here is taken lots and lots of data and averaged it. And so we have its relative decline. So we have a value of 1 in 1970, and you can see that as we progress through the years, there is a decline in abundance of all of those shark and ray species through to around about 2019. And just sort of eyeballing the graph, I would say there's around about 30% in terms of abundance of shark and rays compared to 1970. The plot on the right-hand side comes from the same data, but this is broken down by species. So you can't see the declines that well just because of the way the plot is formatted. But essentially all but one of those species are declining. And just to put some sort of figures on this, sharks and rays are threatened with extinction in 25% of cases. That was in 2014. And the same researchers sort of reanalyzed this, did the same study again in 2021, and unfortunately that figure had increased to 33%. So we're sort of going in the wrong direction with this, and this is due to various things. For example, overfishing, so shark finning and bycatch, I'd imagine lots of people are aware of, but also things like climate change, which is always the elephant in the room, but pollution, habitat loss. There's lots and lots of things that are contributing to these declines. I didn't want to talk about that too much. Instead, what I've decided to talk about is the fact that elasmobranchs are disproportionately affected by human activity. And again, this is quite well demonstrated by these two plots. So this comes from a study in 2003, again published in Nature. And what we have here is two maps, one from 1964 and one from 1980. And the bluey kind of colours represent species which are generally smaller, and the orangey, reddy yellows represent species that are generally bigger. And what we can see is that we have lots more red, orangey, yellows in 1964, and not so many in 1980, and a lot more blue in 1980. And so essentially what this is showing is not that the size of animals is decreasing, although that is happening, but that's not the point of this study. It's actually that species which are bigger are declining at a faster rate than species which are smaller. And I'm sure you can guess that elasmobranchs tend to be those larger species, and so this is telling us that we're losing those species at a faster rate than species which are a bit smaller. Now, this is in large part, not exclusively, but in large part due to sort of an ecological theory, which you could summarize as R versus K selection. And it's kind of a way of very broadly categorizing species into two different camps. So you have K-selected species, which are slow-growing, long-lived, generally very large species which take a long time to reach sexual maturity, and they produce very few young and invest a lot of time in rearing those young. So, for example, elephants. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have K-selected species, which are things like field mice. So they're generally much smaller, they're fast-growing, they don't live for as long, they don't take as long to reach sexual maturity, and when they do, they produce lots and lots of young and make relatively small investments in those individual young. And so this is important for what we're talking about, because it demonstrates the different capacity of these different kinds of life histories to be robust to extraction. So essentially that the potential for population growth is higher in R-selected species than it is in K-selected species, and with elasmobranchs belonging to that K-selected group. And so again, just to put some numbers on this, internationally sharks are harvested at a rate of 6.4 to 7.9%, and this exceeds their average rebound rate of 4.9%. In other words, we are removing sharks and rays at a faster rate than they can be replaced by reproduction of within those populations. So moving on to some management, there are obviously different ways in which you can manage elasmobranch populations, and I'm going to cover something that I've been working on. It's actually the first thing that I did at Sussex IFCO. This was kind of my baby for the first couple of months that I was working there, and I thought it might be useful just to go through some of the research and development that went into introducing this voluntary code of conduct. So this is not legally binding, it's a sort of advisory voluntary guidance for elasmobranchs. But before I do that, I just want to sort of define a term, just because it will help contextualize everything that comes after, which is L50. And the L50 very simply is the size at which 50% of the population are sexually mature. So for example, if you have a shark, and the L50 for that shark species is 1 meter. If you catch a shark which is 1 meter long, there is a 50% chance that that shark is sexually mature, i.e. that it's capable of reproducing. So when I was thinking about what this voluntary management might look like, there are lots of different options. So you have things like total allowable catch, where you might restrict the number of individuals that you're removing. You might have things like technical measures like gear restrictions, so size of net, or having escape hatches on the nets to ensure that animals of a certain size can escape, or to sort of limit certain species being caught in those nets, non-target species, so bycatch. You also have size-based management, so this might be what's called a minimum landing size, so anything below a particular size must be returned. And when I was doing the research, I came across this paper by Martin et al., which was published in 2010. And it's based on data that comes from a 20-year trawl survey in the English Channel. And what they found was that the majority of sharks that were landed were sexually immature. that they're below their L50. And we can see this in the plot on the right hand side. So what those arrows represent on the plots, the black arrows represent the L50 for that particular species. There is either one arrow which is just the average for the species, or there are two arrows which is the sex-specific L50s. The important thing is that the vast majority of data in 5 of those 6 plots lies on the left-hand side of the arrow. Essentially that 50% or more than 50% of the sharks that are landed are below their L50, and i.e. that they have been harvested before there is a 50% chance that they reproduced. Now this to me said that that size-based management might be appropriate, and so that was sort of the route that I went down. And the idea around this is essentially to try and ensure that more than 50% of the sharks that are harvested have reproduced before that event occurs, i.e. that we kind of reverse this extraction versus rebound rate relationship, that we're extracting fewer elasmobranchs, and that rate is below the rate of population growth, such that overall what we have is a growing population as opposed to a declining population. I hope that makes sense. And so the next step, once I sort of decided that a minimum landing size was the way to go, I started to think about the species that I might include in this voluntary code of conduct. And so I based this broadly on 3 factors: their conservation status, so their IUCN status, their population trend, whether they're increasing, decreasing, or stable, and their current level of management, with those species with a relatively little management being considered a higher priority for inclusion in the code of conduct. Once I decided on my species, I then moved on to determining what the actual minimum landing size would be. And I did this through a standardized literature search. So I essentially used the species name and 2 words, size, maturity, which you can see on the right-hand side. And I performed that literature search for every species on my list. I went through every paper that came as a result of all of those searches, and went through the papers and recorded the L50, or sometimes multiple L50s within each paper. And what that gave me is a spreadsheet of species-specific L50s in specific locations, and from that I could take an average, which would give me hopefully a pretty accurate impression of the L50 for each species. The other thing that I tried to do is use location-specific data. So if I could get sort of South Coast or UK-based data, that was great. But any scientist will tell you that you never have perfect data. And so where it wasn't possible to use local data, we just used the next best thing. So essentially data that came from close by. And this is kind of the result of that work. So on the left-hand side, this is the table which details the minimum sizes. You have the 6 species of shark and the 6 species of ray, their IUCN status, their global trend, a very brief description of the current management, and then the minimum sizes, which I've blocked out just because this hasn't actually been published yet. So I guess this is a bit of a sneak peek. But I thought it'd be important just to hold back on the minimum sizes until that gets published. The other thing that we did alongside this to sort of complement the minimum size recommendations is to produce a identification guide. So we purchased some illustrations from Mark Dando, along with including some just descriptions, which obviously allows the fishers to then identify the species that they've caught, refer to the minimum landing size, and then make a decision about whether they're going to return the elasmobranch or not. Just quickly, Mark Dando is actually contributes to a book called Sharks of the World. I have 2 copies, and I would highly recommend it for any budding shark biologists. It basically details pretty much every shark species in the world with some information and like really beautiful illustrations. So yeah, highly recommend that. And the other thing that we did to complement this particular code of conduct was to include welfare guidance. So this is on things like how to handle the animals, gear, so using like hooks without barbs, to ensure that if the animal is returned, it has the highest chance of surviving, or the lowest likelihood of what we call post-release mortality. And if the shark is landed, some guidance on welfare just to make sure that it's processed in an ethical manner. And that's me done. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. I'll invite, I think questions are going to come at the end, but I'm very happy to answer any questions. I promise not to bite your head off like this shark. And if you want any shark and fisheries related news, feel free to follow me on Twitter. But that's it from me. Thanks for listening.
Amazing. Thank you, George. Do you want to, yeah, stop screen sharing. Perfect. Yeah, do keep popping questions during the Q&A. There's already a few really good ones in there, and we will definitely get them all to the end. I did just go through our little attendee list, and there's a good 7 or 8 names that I recognise here tonight. So thanks for joining us. That's really appreciated. And thank you for that lovely presentation, George. There is, honestly, everyone's got so many questions about it. You've really piqued some interest there. That's really exciting. Nikki, Ella, welcome to the webinar. How are we?
Hi, yeah, good, thanks. Hello.
Great. The floor is all yours.
Okay, let's hope the screen share works. Okay, so can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And all good. Nikki, I'll hand over to you to start.
Great, thank you. So yeah, hi everyone, and yeah, thanks again to George. That was really, really interesting. I learned lots of stuff then too. So me and Ella are just going to do a little bit of a double act now. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our Wild Coast Sussex project, and then Ella's going to talk to you about some of the elasmobranch species that we get here in Sussex, and how you guys can all get involved. Okay, it's working. Great. So yeah, our Wild Coast Sussex project, just very briefly, it's led by us at Sussex Wildlife Trust. We work in partnership with Marine Conservation Society, with Sussex IFCA, as we mentioned. So great to have George here tonight, and Brighton Sea Life as well. And it's all funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. Gone too quick. So the aim of our project is to work with communities all along the Sussex coast to kind of inspire them and help people connect to the coast, to help them to sort of take action to protect it as well. And we're working with lots of different communities all along the coast. So we're working with commercial fishermen. We are kind of helping them to recycle their end-of-life fishing gear. And so far we've recycled about 12 tonnes over the last couple of years of the project. And we're also sort of helping them to remove any fishing gear that ends up in the sea, so sometimes known as ghost gear. So we can help them kind of, if they report it to us, and then we can remove that from the sea. And we're working with primary schools all along the coast, getting them out onto the beach to take part in our Wild Beach programme. That gets them kind of out regularly to their local beach, and also training up their teachers so that even when we're not there, they're able to get them out onto the beach.
Cool, thanks, Nikki. So yeah, I am gonna talk about the shark, skates and rays that we get in Sussex. So first of all, you heard George using the word elasmobranchs quite a lot. But what does that actually mean? So shark, skates and rays are part of a group of animals called cartilaginous elasmobranchs. So cartilaginous, I mean, from the name you can guess it's fish with skeletons made of cartilage. So if you were to feel the hard bits of your ear, that's cartilage, and that's what sharks, skates and rays skeletons are made of. So they're quite flexible, and they're a lot lighter than bone as well. And elasmobranchs are a subclass of cartilaginous fish, which have 5 to 7 pairs of gill slits. So sharks, skates and rays fall into that category. So yeah, I'll take you through a few species that we get here. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about them all, but just sort of the more common ones that you might be able to see evidence of on the beach, or to see in the wild if you are a diver. So yeah, we get small spotted catsharks. These are sometimes known as lesser spotted dogfish. or roughhound, or even rock salmon. They're nocturnal. They eat marine invertebrates, including mollusks and crustaceans, cephalopods and polychaete worms. They also sometimes feed on small bony fish. I would like to point out that they are completely harmless to humans. Sharks have a very bad reputation, but shark attacks are extremely rare, and the species that we get in Sussex are absolutely harmless to humans. You don't need to worry about them at all. This species in particular doesn't even reach 1 meter long, I believe, at full size. So yeah, there's really absolutely nothing to worry about. It's kind of always a question that I get when I talk about sharks is, are they dangerous? And no, it's not a problem. There's just another nice picture of it swimming through a kelp forest. So we also get nurse hounds. This is a species that looks fairly similar to the small spotted catshark. And in fact, they are sometimes called the greater spotted catshark. They are bigger in size. They have sort of larger spots. They have a very similar diet. It's also actually been known that they eat smaller sharks, including the small spotted catshark. So other names you might know this one by is bullhuss, or again, rock salmon. So if you see huss or rock salmon on menus, say at fish and chip shops, then this is what you're eating. You're either eating this species, the small spotted catshark, or even another species of shark. It has been found that in some places through genetic testing that a species called the spiny dogfish was being sold as salmon, and that's actually an endangered species in Europe. So it's just to flag that it's important to be mindful of what you are eating. And then moving on to the rays that we get here. So this is a thornback ray, named for the many thorns that are found on its back. Often common names are quite descriptive, as is with this one. Quite a few ray species might have thorns on their back, but this species has sort of the largest and most of them. So thornback rays are near threatened globally and in Europe. They have a diet of crustaceans and small fish. So they have teeth. Here's a picture of its mouth on the underside. So you can see on its, I don't actually know if you can see my mouse pointer here, but I'm circling the teeth. They're sort of like these flat crushing plates in like sort of mosaic pattern. They're very good for like crushing up the shells of crustaceans. It's thought that the thorns on their back is a defense mechanism against being eaten. We also get the undulate ray, so it's got this very striking pattern on its back. So this species is globally endangered and near threatened in Europe. However, they are locally abundant in the English Channel. And anecdotally, like they are relatively commonly caught by fishers. And it's thought this could be because they are a source population in Sussex. So this basically means that their reproduction exceeds their mortality. So this is obviously great news for the population here in Sussex, but like I say, globally, they are endangered. They also have a similar diet, thornback ray. So we also have the spotted ray. So it's a little bit smaller than those other two species. It's smaller bodied, and it's small size and sort of relatively higher fecundity. So that means the number of young it produces means it's more resilient to fishing pressure than some of the larger bodied skates and rays. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between skates and rays. As you notice, all those rays that I've just spoken about, their common name is ray, thornback ray, undulate ray, spotted ray, but they are in actual fact skates. It's just that common names are confusing, but they are skates. And the difference is that skates lay eggs, they are oviparous, and rays give birth to live young, they are viviparous. There's sort of visual ways you can identify between the two as well. Rays tend to have a longer and more slender tail, whereas skates have a shorter and stockier tail. Skates, no species of skates have a stinging spine on their tail, whereas some species of rays do have a stinging spine. So not all of them do. So famous rays you may have heard of is a manta ray, obviously the biggest ray that, in the world. They don't have stinging spines, but they are rays. They give birth to live young. So just here visually, so that's again the undulate ray and a common stingray, which we also get in Sussex. And you can see there the stinging barb on its tail, and you can see it's much slender and longer than the skate. So you will kind of hear people talking about using the words skates and rays kind of interchangeably, and that's just again because of the common names problem. Okay, now we've got a video. So this is from Sussex Underwater, who are a group of local divers who are raising awareness of the amazing underwater life in Sussex. You can join their Facebook page where they share loads of amazing footage. They go out and dive all the time, and they have very kindly given us permission to show this very recent video that they created of skates and rays. So hopefully this will work. Yeah, thanks a lot to Sussex Underwater for that. And there should be a link when we finish that will take you to their Facebook page so you can follow them and see all the amazing stuff they put up.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. Just thank you again, Sussex Underwater, because it really helps to bring it to life, doesn't it? Not many people in Sussex, actually get to see all of these amazing species. So yeah, really big thank you to them. Really amazing to see that, and to be able to show you that we do have a lot of great elasmobranchs just off our beaches in Sussex. So now we just wanted to talk to you a little bit about how you can help and how you can get involved. So Ella, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Shark Trust and their egg case hunt project?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the Shark Trust are a UK-based charity, and they've been engaging with the public about shark conservation since 2003. They have a project called the Great Egg Case Hunt, where they encourage people, anybody basically, to record any egg cases or mermaids' purses, which is the sort of common name, I don't even know, yes, a slang name, is that slang? I don't know. They're called mermaids purses because supposedly they look a bit like the purses that a mermaid might have, who knows. But yes, so they encourage people through their project to record them. And by recording them, the egg cases that get washed up on the beach or even seen developing underwater, if you're a diver, then we can get a better understanding of the presence and diversity of egg-laying species in British waters. And I think I had a quick look at their most recent stats, and since 2003, they've had 300,000 egg cases recorded. And in 2021, they had 21,000 records alone, which is amazing. So we want to keep up that momentum, and we want to get lots of people out in Sussex doing this. So yeah, just before we go into like how you do it and what to look for. Oh, it's not letting me change slide now. I don't know.
Shall I do it?
Yeah.
I can. It's not letting me do it either.
Uh-oh.
Sorry guys, that's exactly what I was worried about happening.
Oh, it's done it.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So just a little word, a little thing about how to stay safe on the beach if you are going out to record egg cases. So always check the tide times before you go. The best and safest thing to do is go on a falling tide, so when the tide is going out. If you're going on your own, then tell somebody where you're going and stay away from the bases of cliffs. Obviously in Sussex we've got our fantastic spectacular chalk cliffs, but they are pretty unstable, so just make sure you stay away from the bases so you don't get hit by any rock falls. And of course respect any wildlife that you find in their habitats. Don't take any live wildlife home with you. Follow the seashore code, which you'll be able to find just by googling it. And yeah, you can always do a beach clean while you're at it, because the best place to look for egg cases is in the strand line, and I guarantee you that you will also find rubbish. I'm sure everybody who's been to the beach, which I hope is all of you, knows that every time you go there will be rubbish, and we try and promote the sort of the idea to keep the beach and coast cleaner than you found it. So yeah, you can combine a beach clean with an egg case survey. Yeah, so Nikki, I don't know if you want to talk about some of the methods.
Yep.
Do we go through?
I'll
move.
it.
Oh, now it's frozen again. Sorry, it's whenever the polls come up.
Sorry guys, just having a few technical difficulties with the slides.
That's my fault again. Give it 20 seconds and I'll close the poll and you can move the next slide, I promise.
Oh, okay. It's worked now.
There we go. Okay, so yeah, there's a few different ways you can go about this. So you just go down onto the beach, just whenever you're down there for a walk. I popped down on my lunch break today, and there were loads and loads of egg cases washed up on my local beach at lunchtime today. So if you just happen to come across them, just you can record any that you find along your way. You can also do like a time survey, so you can actually go out for a set amount of time and see how many that you find in that time. And you can also kind of just measure the distance and just have a set distance that you measure, and just go along the sort of top of the strand line, and then you come back along the beach. So you've sort of covered that whole section of the beach. So there's sort of 3 different ways that you can go about doing the survey. And then once you've done that, once you've got them, because if you go and have a look, if you go down, if you get a chance this weekend, go and have a look. If you're going to a Sussex beach, I can pretty much guarantee that at this time of year you probably will find some egg cases. So what you want to do is make a note of where you found them. So just the kind of the name of the beach, roughly where they were. If you're able to put them in some water, then and actually just soak them, because then that means that they go back to their original size, because they're quite dried up quite often when you find them on the beach. And then if you get them back to their original size, they're much easier to kind of identify them, because you can measure them, and that matches up with some of the ID stuff that we'll show you in a moment. And then you're ready to ID. So
yeah, so the Shark Trust website have got loads of resources to help you ID, and actually through their sort of recording process, there'll be a little flow chart which can help you identify what species you found. But the common ones that we find in Sussex are ones I've spoken about earlier in the presentation. So that's the spotted ray, thornback ray, the undulate ray, and the small spotted catshark. So I don't think I've ever found any other species than that. I don't know about you, Nikki.
no, not on the Sussex coast. They're the only ones I've found.
Yeah, so those 4 are you pretty much guaranteed to be one of those 4. So just some identifying features that you can look for. So this is the thornback ray egg case. So it's almost as wide as it is long. So that's excluding the horns, and the horns are the 4 long, horny bits on each corner. So that bit in the middle is called the capsule. So yeah, it's nearly as wide as it is long, so sort of square shaped. It's 5 to 8 centimeters in length. So this is after soaking. So as Nikki said, it's important to soak it because they become dehydrated and they shrink. So it's much more difficult to accurately identify them. And they have obvious keels. So keels are these bits on the side. I always think it kind of looks like this seams that have been pressed down to seal it, like a pie, maybe? No, a pastry, a pasty, let's say. I don't know. But this species is the only one that has those obvious keels. So it makes the thornback ray egg case very easy to identify, and you can be quite confident in your ID, basically. And then we get quite a lot of the undulate ray. As I said, the undulate ray is globally endangered, but it is locally abundant. So we do find loads of these washed up on the beach. So this egg case doesn't have any keels. I hope you can understand what I mean by that. You don't have that pressed down seam. That's kind of the simplest way I can describe it. It's a little bit larger, can be between 7 and 9 centimeters in length. They can, not always, have these sort of like attachment fibers on the side. And their bottom horns are slightly wider than what, you may ask? Well, slightly wider than the spotted rays. So these 2 species can be quite tricky to differentiate between. So the spotted ray also has no keels. It's a little bit smaller, but there is crossover. So this one is 5 to 7.5 centimeters in length, whereas your undulate ray 7 to 9. And I have seen what I think is a quite large spotted ray egg case, and then also quite small undulate ray egg cases. So it can be quite difficult. So you know how I said there was these sort of attachment fibers on the undulate ray egg cases. The spotted rays are sort of a cleaner egg case. They don't have those attachment fibers, and their bottom horns are slightly, so the smaller horns are slightly tapered, and they have this like pinched waist. That's sort of the best way to describe it. It has that tapering that the undulate ray doesn't really have. But they can, despite having those identifying features, they can look extremely similar. So here's their pictures side by side. And Nikki, do you want to say what we call them if we can't identify between the 2?
Yeah, so you know, sometimes we go down to the beach and we might find like 200 of these egg cases. So to sit and measure them all, and you know, when the measurements overlap and when you're looking for a kind of pinched waist or not, it's quite hard to tell. So luckily the Shark Trust have come up with this great way of avoiding having to identify that. Sorry, I'm not able to click it on again.
You should be able to. I think the arrows just, there you go.
So we got a spongulate ray. So if you're not sure if it's a spotted or undulate, you can call it a spongulate. So I think the Shark Trust would prefer if we can identify them, but if not, it's better to just say it's either a spotted or an undulate. And if you can kind of send them a photo as well, then they might be able to identify it from the photo. So yeah, spongulate, what a great word.
It is a great word, yeah. Oh, and then of course, let's not forget the small spotted catshark. These are very easy to identify. They are much lighter in colour, as you can see. They're much more elongated. They have curling tendrils extending from each corner, which attach to things like seaweed. They can be quite small, from 3 to 8 centimetres in length, and they can often be found bunched together with other catshark egg cases. I think I've found bunches of like more than 10 before, I think. So yeah, you can find a lot all tangled up together. So yeah, you're pretty sure that that it is a small spotted catshark when you find one that looks like that. So yeah, once you are ready to record them, there are 2 different ways. You can do it on your browser. There should be links again at the end of this talk that will take you to these places online. So yeah, there's quite a simple recording form. And what we'd like to ask you to do is, in the organisation box there, is to put Wild Coast Sussex, and in that way we can track how many egg cases are actually being recorded as a result of sort of our project, which would be fantastic to know. So yeah, it's very easy. You select your location, so the beach, I've chosen Ovingdean here, your region, and you can select the point on the map there. So it needs the latitude and longitude, but you can select with your pointer and it will fill that in automatically for you. So some of you may have GPS, ways of recording GPS, and that's great. You can put that in, but if you don't, you can just click on the map and it will generate it for you. And then it will ask you the date and what species you think it is. And you can put in any sort of accompanying notes if you want to, and they really encourage you to upload photos as well, because that can really help, especially if you've got a Undulate Ray. It's very useful to put a picture up. And the best kind of pictures that you can take are things with scale in it, so a ruler or something else so that they can gauge the size of it. So there's a 2-pence piece and a ruler in that one. And I think, Nikki, tell me if you think I'm wrong, but I think that's a spotted ray.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it's about 6 centimetres, I think, in capsule length. It has that sort of pinched waist, I think. And I think those attached bits are bits of seaweed, so it's not necessarily those sort of attachment fibres that the Undulate Ray has. Anyway, I think I would say that was a spotted. The Shark Trust have also very recently, I think, was it just this week, Nikki, that they were
the last couple of weeks? Yeah, they've launched a new app which we've been waiting for ages, because they did have an app, and then they took that one down and finally given us a new one. It's still got a few teething problems at the moment, which they're just sorting out, so they haven't kind of launched it fully yet, but look out for it. You can you should be able to download it already. But yeah, if you struggle with it, it might just be, well, they've got some teething problems, but it's great. You can ID your egg cases on there, so it's got pictures to help you identify it, and then just really quickly record it and stick your photos in. So yeah, the app's really useful.
Yeah, it's much more easy to do on the go, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's sort of the egg case hunt, and it would be great if as many of you as possible who go out onto the beach can record anything that you find. It would be fantastic to get hundreds more records in Sussex. And there are other ways that you can get involved with marine projects in Sussex. So as part of the Wildlife Trust, we have quite a few different citizen science projects. So we've got Sea Search and Shore Search. So Sea Search is, you need to be a qualified scuba diver, but you can come and volunteer with us, and we go out to sites all along the Sussex coast and record the habitats and species. So you go out, do a dive, record the species, map the habitat, and that data is then really helpful in lots of different ways, including we've been looking specifically at sites important for kelp recovery over the past year. and it can help with the designation of new protected areas and things like that. So it's a really great way to get involved. And I think I mentioned earlier as well, with the shark and ray egg cases, obviously most of us will be recording on the strand line on the beach, but if you are out on a dive and you find one developing in the water, then that can be recorded as well. And that's also extremely helpful data. We also have our shore search project. So this is, again, working with volunteers to go out onto the coast and survey the intertidal zone. So essentially it's rock pooling, and it's great fun. You don't need any prior knowledge. You can come along and learn on the go. We've got a really great group of dedicated volunteers who come out very regularly. And it's a fantastic way to get involved with marine conservation. Again, it's about mapping the species and habitats that we have along the Sussex coast. And again, that data is really, really important, and it is contributed to lots of different things. We also have our Sussex Kelp recording scheme. So this is part of the Sussex Kelp Recovery Project. So again, similar to the egg case hunt, really, anybody who goes out into the beach, any sort of sea user, can help us by recording any occurrences of kelp. So even if it is washed up on the shore, we want to know about it, because it can really help us paint a picture of where the kelp is recovering in Sussex. And again, there will be a link to these projects and at the end of this talk. With the Sussex Kelp Recording Scheme, you just have to sign up, and then it's like an online portal that you put your records in. And yeah, if lots of people get involved in that as well, would be fantastic. And then Nikki, I'll pass over to you to talk about the champions.
Yeah, so I think we've already had a few people asking questions about how they can kind of get involved and record it. So obviously you can download the Shark Trust app and get recording straight away. But if you kind of want to get a bit more involved, then you can sign up to become a Wild Coast Sussex champion. We can give you a little bit more training if you want on how to identify them. And yeah, you can just go out and help us get as many of these records as possible. And then we've got lots of other opportunities as well. So like I mentioned, some of the other things we're doing around kind of wild beach and beach cleans and things like that. So we've got lots of other volunteer opportunities. So yeah, just get in touch. And I think the Shark Trust said, because it's their 20-year anniversary that they've been doing the egg case hunts next year, they're trying to get to 500,000 records by the end of next year. So it'd be good if we can get lots of those from Sussex. Oh, it's done it too quickly now. There we go. So that's just all of our details on how you can get in touch with the project, email address, follow us on social media. You can sign up to a newsletter, and as Ella said, always leave the beach and ocean cleaner than you found it. Right, that's us. Thank you very much.
Stop share. There we go.
Amazing. Thank you so much, you guys. That was fantastic. There is going to be a ton of links in the exit page. So when I click end on this webinar, a web page will open up, and there's going to be so many links there. I'll quickly run you through some of what will be there. There's going to be a link to Sussex IFCA, a link to Sharks Trust Mermaids, Perth surveys, where to record, shore search, sea shirts, kelp recording, get involved with Wild Coast Sussex, Sussex Underwater Facebook group, and a beautiful Undulate Ray t-shirts that David Shrigley designed for us. In addition, there is going to be my email address. I'd love to hear from you. Tell us what we can do better with webinars. Tell us what themes you'd like to hear from webinars. Tell us what you love about webinars, just webinars in general. Email me, that's great. There's a link for our upcoming webinars, and online talks can be found there as well. Our next one is a members only webinar, and that's going to be on the greater and lesser spotted woodpeckers, and that's on the 13th of December. And our next webinar that's open to everyone will be on our Leven Down reserve, which is going to be really exciting. We're going to learn all about what beautiful animals we can find on that reserve. That's enough about that. We had 25 questions, I think, come through. George and I have done quite a good job at getting through and typing out some answers to the ones that we could answer. So I think a lot of what's left is for you two.
I've been milling away in the background answering some questions, but I'm quite happy to go over some of them if we we have time. Or
yeah, let's have a look. Are there any species that cross Atlantic from the UK to the US?
Oh, I missed that one. Actually, very interestingly, so there's a group called OSearch, who they have a big research vessel, and they're actually focused on white sharks, great white sharks, and I believe they either have already embarked or are soon embarking on an expedition in and around Europe and the UK. And they're interested as to see if there are any sort of great whites or other large sharks in UK waters. So, I mean, if there are, then they're almost certainly crossing the Atlantic. So that'd be pretty cool. And then we also, the other sort of large stuff that we get is poor beagles, but I'll be honest, I'm not completely sure if they would migrate across the Atlantic. It's obviously quite a long way. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but if we have white sharks in the UK, which I personally feel would be really cool and exciting, then they are almost definitely, swimming across the Atlantic.
Amazing. Wow. Very, very cool. Two very similar questions here from Nicholas and Kevin. What months do you find egg cases, or like what months don't they breed? Are they found all year round or just in the autumn/winter?
I'm going to go with that. So we do find them kind of all year round. It's an interesting one with things that get washed up on the strand line. It's sometimes more about the weather than actually about whether the things are breeding or not. So just because the things are kind of getting washed up in the rough seas. So there was another question there as well about if we ever find full ones, you know, if they've still got a ray or shark inside or if they're empty. So nearly all of the ones that we find on the beach are empty. If you did ever find one with a shark or ray inside, then definitely do pop it back in the sea. But the ones that we're talking about, they're all empty. So they've just kind of got washed in when there happens to be a big storm. So it does tend to kind of be around the winter, more around the storms, rather than kind of linked to their breeding season. I don't know if anyone else.
No, I was just going to say, in terms of whether you find them empty or with sort of the embryos still inside, I have only ever found 2 egg cases with them still inside, and I've found, I don't know, I couldn't tell you how many I found, hundreds and possibly thousands, and I've only ever found 2. And unfortunately, they were dead already. They'd obviously been washed up for quite some time, and they were underdeveloped, so they weren't ready to hatch. They just happened to still have been washed up with the little shark baby still inside. It was very interesting to see, but quite sad. But obviously, if you find any and you think they could be a possibility, they're still alive, then just put them back in the sea. And that will give them their best chance of survival.
Amazing. One final question, and then we'll wrap up. Are sharks/rays good water quality indicators?
Yes.
One word answer. We'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I can. They are, yeah, and then they're sensitive to things like water quality, just like everything else. And actually, what you find is, because sharks generally sit at the top of the food chain, you have a process called bioaccumulation. So if you have bad water quality and that those inorganic materials are concentrated up the food chain, and so actually things that are at the top of the food chain are generally more affected. And so yes, they would be an indicator, and that's why. I'll stop there.
Fantastic, thanks, George. You guys are so much better at keeping to time than James Duncan. I'm going to say that straight off. Oh my goodness, I had to give him 2 time reminders when he did his birds webinar a few weeks ago. But everything he said was really interesting. Thank you guys all so much for being here. Thanks for joining us on your Thursday evening.